Welcome back again. In today's lesson we will discuss methodologies. Methodologies are crucial to learn and utilize because if you understand how people learn, then you can tailor your classes to help the students learn more. In ancient times, people learned a foreign language by either moving because of war or because of business. Most people only learned a few phrases. In the early 1900s, because of the war in Europe, many people moved away from Europe and had to learn a foreign language. Most students learned by attending an established private institute. These were mostly rich people who had the means to travel to new parts of the world. Since most teachers were native speakers of the target language, there were no courses that including teaching methods. After World War I and up towards World War II, it became apparent that people needed to learn foreign languages. Many scholars and educational institutions looked at ways to teach a target language. This has become known as methodology, a theory or method of how to teach a course effectively. In this instance, how to teach English or a language. Up until the 1970s, there were very few books on how to teach ESL learners. However, with the influx of learners, many people have created new ways of teaching. The first way of teaching started in the early 1700s when children went to private institutions. This was known as the grammar translation method. After World War II, servicemen returned home and learned how to speak a foreign language in what has become known as the audiolingual method. Much debate has been argued around what methodology works best. The truth is a combination of all of them will work at any given time if the teacher understands different methods and learns how to use them effectively when a class seems not to understand the lesson plans. Popular methods lose favor in classrooms only to repeat many years later by another class. Remember, use the methodology you seem fit with, but change the one you are using to help your class if there are problems in their learning. Grammar translation method. This is the most popular methodology when it comes to teaching grammar. It begins with the explanation of the rule that follows a syllabus and lesson plan. After a rule is explained, the class is given exercises where they can practice translating words and sentences into and out of the mother language. If you have ever heard of the Rosetta Stone, you will understand that this is how the stone was deciphered. The stone was written in Greek and in two versions of hieroglyphics. Since ancient Greek and Latin are now considered dead languages because they are only used in literature, two scholars had the task of deciphering the stone. The scholars deciphered the ancient Greek and noticed patterns in the hieroglyphics. They concluded that the hieroglyphics were saying the same things as the Greek. They broke the ancient Egyptian text from this stone, which gave us the insight into ancient Egyptian society. This is completely teacher-centered and focuses directly on grammar and the rules with little emphasis on speaking. When a student learns Latin or ancient Greek, they use this form because the languages aren't spoken, but still can read ancient texts and literature. Latin can be used to help with vocabulary and understanding legal and medical terminology. The students were prepared to take in written tests, so the method helped create an atmosphere where the student would be fluent in reading and writing, but lacked in the speaking area of the language. The class is taught in the mother language and not the target language for the students to understand the grammar terms and rules easier. They learn rules that most native speakers don't understand and they begin reading comprehension quicker, but don't learn the meaning of certain sentences. They only understand the grammar structure of a sentence, but sometimes not the meaning. The direct method. Because of the grammar translation method did little way of teaching students how to speak and communicate with each other orally, the direct method was created in the late 1800s. Some teachers thought it would be easier to teach a student by the way a native speaker would learn, naturally. Students now could learn how to effectively communicate with each other orally and practice speaking along with grammar lessons. However, students weren't immersed as deeply into the grammar rules as they were speaking. It was discovered that students could learn a language without having to learn complex grammar rules or knowing of Latin or ancient Greek. The teacher now spoke in the target language and the students quickly learned the language. This method was quickly adopted by private schools in Europe. One of being the Berlitz School, created by Charles Berlitz in Berlin, whose method is still sold today on tapes and compact discs. Because of budget restraints from public schools, the method went back to the grammar translation method because administrations thought the students weren't learning enough grammar during the lessons for the money being spent. Each school had to hire a native speaker of the language that proved to be too costly for the size of the classroom and the amount of classes that were taught daily. Some of the feature of this method is that the class is held completely in the target language, vocabulary and phrases are taught more than grammar. Students will learn grammar using their own rules. Students learn pronunciation and speaking by practicing with role play, pair work and using real-life situations. This is highly effective when you have a small group or dedicated students. The audiolingual approach. During World War II, America discovered that most of the world knew English, but few Americans knew a foreign language. In Europe, it's mandatory that a student learn a foreign language. During this time, American troops were besieged by stolen radio transmissions by enemy troops. To compensate, the United States asked Native Americans to use a dialect that only was spoken in the United States. Before the war, people who spoke a foreign language were looked down upon. Many people believed that if you come to America you should learn the language. During the war, people who were of European descent who spoke a language of the Axis were mistrusted and treated as enemies of the nation. After the war concluded, some citizens decided to learn a foreign language to help the United States against foreign enemy agents. Today it's still mandatory in many European nations to learn a foreign language. While in America few schools offer foreign languages. With the influx of a high percentage of Spanish-speaking Americans, schools have implemented Spanish language programs in many Southwest schools. Because the military needed to learn languages quickly during the war, the audiolingual method was created. Taking cue from the direct approach, students learned phrases, but not grammar, in order to learn a language. They would listen to a phrase and repeat it until they could speak it without having to think. The students could learn to master a language in a very quick period of time. However, they still were not able to read or write in a foreign language. However, this method was perfect for a spy to listen and infiltrate enemy positions. The major problem with learning this method was that students did not learn grammar, reading or writing. They learned direct phrases that weren't addressed with the addition of many new vocabulary terms or grammatical reasoning behind the terms. A new method, Pimsleur, was adopted to help students learn a foreign language using a backwards chain drill, utilizing this method. It is used by the military and CIA, along with the new Rosetta Stone CD programs. The silent way. This is a little-known method that can provide great results if used properly. I have used it with much success when it comes to pronunciation. Caleb Gattegno founded The Silent Way in the early 1970s. It was created to help students with their pronunciation. Since what you hear and what you speak sound differently, students now could visualize how a sound should be orally transmitted. The Silent Way was created to help students learn pronunciation when it came to reading, writing and speaking. No previous method was created to help pronunciation, reading or writing. This method was created to immediately correct pronunciation problems before they became a hindrance to learning. There are approximately 58 sounds in the English language according to the chart. Each color shows how each sound is written, many times various different ways, and the sound is orally presented to the students. The students now learn how to put together words and how to pronounce the sounds associated with it. To help students speak, the teacher presents each sound and the letters associated with the sound. The students then mimic the sound they heard from the teacher. A teacher also can point at an area on the chart and pronounce a sound and have the students follow. The students are then asked to write in the native language the sound that they hear. The teacher repeats it slowly and for several times until the students all have wrote down the sound they hear. The teacher then asks the students to pronounce the sounds. I use this method when teaching 5-year-olds to read with much success. Many people will still use the phonemic alphabet to teach pronunciation, which is fine when it comes to reading and utilizing a dictionary. However, this is the best method if you want to teach pronunciation quickly and effectively. The phonemic alphabet can be used with this method with a great deal of success if taught simultaneously. However, there are few countries that the silent way, may not work. Use the silent way to teach pronunciation if you find yourself in a situation where the students are having a hard time with pronunciation. That is all the time we have for today. In the next lesson we will continue with methodologies.